Chapter 3: Secrets Within the Family. The following morning, Ashcroft Manor looked deceptively serene. Sunlight fell across the dew-drenched lawns. Birds trilled from the hedgerows, and yet the household carried the unmistakable weight of unease. The masquerade's glitter had dissolved into silence, and with it, the first whispers of scandal had hardened into suspicion. Miss Marple, seated near a tall window in the breakfast room, knitted calmly while her sharp eyes absorbed the shifting atmosphere. She had learned long ago that the truth of a household rarely revealed itself in grand gestures. It lay instead in hushed tones, fleeting glances, and the odd detail out of place. Ashcroft Manor was full of such details. Lady Helena Ashcroft. At the head of the table sat Lady Helena, the widow of Lord Ashcroft. Her posture was impeccable, her expression coolly composed. Yet beneath the thin veil of elegance, Miss Marple detected fatigue. Eyes slightly reddened, a tremor in her hands as she buttered her toast. Lady Helena spoke sparingly, though when she did, her voice carried an authority that commanded obedience. "Tragedy is a cruel guest," she murmured, "but we must not allow gossip to sully the family's dignity." Her words were aimed at the assembled household, but Miss Marple caught the fleeting glance Helena cast toward her children. A warning, perhaps, or a plea. Edward Ashcroft. Opposite her sat Edward, the eldest son, broad-shouldered and restless. His jaw was set, his fingers drummed against the tablecloth. He claimed composure, yet the faint flush across his face betrayed agitation. "I cannot believe we're entertaining the idea of foul play," he said, though a trace of defiance laced his tone. "Accidents do happen, even here." Miss Marple did not miss the way his eyes flicked, almost unconsciously, toward the library door whenever the subject arose. If Edward hoped to convince, he chose his words poorly. Beatrice Ashcroft. Beside him, Beatrice, the younger sister, looked pale and distracted. Her beauty was fragile, almost ethereal, but her demeanor suggested unease rather than grief. She toyed with a silver teaspoon, avoiding her mother's gaze. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Father was troubled lately," she whispered. "I sometimes heard him pacing the corridors at night. Perhaps he slipped?" A convenient explanation, Miss Marple thought, though one delivered without conviction. Beatrice's downcast eyes spoke of knowledge she dared not share openly. Cousin Richard across the table lounged Richard Fairfax, a cousin of the Ashcrofts and frequent guest at the manor. Dressed impeccably even at breakfast, he exuded the careless charm of a man accustomed to indulgence. Yet his glib remarks were undercut by a sharpness in his gaze. "If you ask me," he drawled, "the old spiral staircase has claimed its share of victims. Steep steps, waxed floor, dim light. Rather like an executioner's tool dressed as architecture." His tone was jesting, but Miss Marple noted how his eyes lingered on Lady Helena, gauging her reaction. There was history between them, perhaps financial, perhaps personal, and Richard's debts were no secret in society. The governess hovering near the doorway was Miss Clara Whitfield, the governess to Beatrice. A woman in her 30s, plain of dress but sharp of mind, she blended into the background with practiced skill. Yet Miss Marple recognized her watchfulness, the way Clara's eyes darted from one family member to the next, as though keeping account of their every word. When Helena dismissed her, Clara bowed and slipped out silently, though not before Miss Marple observed a flicker of anxiety in her expression. The governess, too, carried secrets. The butlers and maids, later, during her quiet wanderings, Miss Marple paused in the servants' quarters. Mr. Graves, the butler, carried himself with measured dignity, but the deep lines on his face told of sleepless nights. When questioned gently, he admitted, "My lady insisted the candles be trimmed and lit before the guests gathered. Yet when Sir Reginald fell, I was certain they had been snuffed earlier than expected. I cannot account for it." The maids whispered of seeing Edward storm into the library during the masquerade, his mask still in hand, muttering curses. Another claimed Beatrice had been near tears, hiding in the gallery above the hall. Fragments of truth, perhaps, or distortions born of fear. Miss Marple's silent accounting. By midday, Miss Marple had gathered enough impressions to begin forming her invisible tapestry of the night's events. Each thread was faint, fragile, but together they began to outline a picture of motive and opportunity. Lady Helena. Calm on the surface, yet Miss Marple sensed desperation. Rumors hinted Lord Ashcroft had considered altering his will, a change that might strip Helena of her security. Edward, a man burdened by debt and ambition, his presence near the library too coincidental to dismiss. Beatrice. Fragile, secretive, with eyes shadowed by something more than grief. Richard Fairfax. The charming cousin with extravagant tastes, always in need of money. His humor disguised calculation. Clara Whitfield. The governess who saw all, heard all, and perhaps knew too much. A letter revealed. That afternoon, Miss Marple wandered into the library itself, under pretense of examining the scene again. The spiral staircase loomed above her, its polished oak railing catching the pale light from tall windows. At its base, flowers now masked the place of death, but the shadow of the fall lingered. She traced her fingers along the bookshelves until her eyes caught an anomaly, a slip of paper protruding from between two volumes. Sliding it free, she found a letter in Sir Reginald's handwriting. The ink was hurried, the words unfinished. If anything should happen, look to the will. Not all under this roof can be trusted. Miss Marple folded the letter delicately and tucked it into her sleeve. The implications were plain enough. Sir Reginald had known danger lurked within his own household. The gathering storm, by evening, tension at Ashcroft Manor was palpable. Conversation stopped when Miss Marple entered a room. Candles burned lower than usual, their flickering light casting long shadows that danced across portraits of long-dead ancestors. Every eye betrayed suspicion. Edward glared too fiercely at his cousin. Beatrice avoided her mother's touch. Lady Helena, once regal, seemed increasingly brittle under the strain. Even the servants whispered behind closed doors. Miss Marple, outwardly serene, felt the threads tightening. Each contradiction, each subtle glance, wove into a web of deception. The truth was close, but fragile, like a glass bauble suspended by the thinnest thread. Closing note. As Miss Marple retired that night to her guest chamber, she reflected on what she had seen. The Fairfax family was bound by blood and reputation, but beneath their polished veneer lay jealousy, fear, and resentment. In her quiet way, she whispered to herself, "The dead rarely lie. It is the living who twist the truth, and somewhere within these walls, someone has already betrayed it." Outside, the wind howled across the fields of Ashcroft Manor, rattling the old windows as though echoing the secrets still hidden within. The case was only beginning, and Miss Marple knew that by peeling back each layer of deception, she would eventually expose the hand that had turned a masquerade into murder.